From the Warhammer Imperium magazine, collected short stories narrated by J.H. Miniatures. At the request of Inquisitor Draxos, the Tomb Awakens. Militarum Tempestus. Status report. Lieutenant Garius Leonin, 11th Capic Eagles. Adeptus Mechanicus forces have breached the Xenos Archaeosite and awoken a nest of murderous Xenos creatures. We are outnumbered and outmatched. Our casualties are severe, and our position here is untenable. Requests immediate reinforcement. May the Emperor save our souls. Sensor report. Life forms detected. Organic origin. Entrance breach. Intruders detected. Overlord's crypt and command center. Canoptech defense routines activated. Awakening protocols online. Central tomb compromised. Assembly chamber breached. Redirecting Canoptech defense constructs to intercept. Status fields deactivated. Command protocols transferred to Overlord Agaseth. Within the obsidian bowels of her tomb world, a Necron Overlord rises from her status crypt, her slumber permanently disturbed by the presence of verminous intruders. She awoke in darkness, her mind a confusing haze of blazing alarms and fractured memories. As power flooded through her body once more, her senses sharpened, and her disordered mind began to clear. She looked down at her metallic form, and remembered. She was Agaseth, overlord of the Sautek dynasty, once of the Necrontyr. She had been robbed of her flesh. She could no longer feel the cool air of the crypt upon her skin, yet she felt neither sorrow nor rage. Merely emptiness. The massive lid of the obsidian sarcophagus in which she had been entombed lay open. She rose from her place of rest and stepped forward into the chamber beyond. Canoptech maintenance units scuttled across the dusty floor, repairing cracks in the obsidian stone and reconnecting trailing cables. Agaseth had no idea how much time had passed since she had entered stasis. It was clear, however, that she had been awakened early. She could hear alarms ringing through the complex, and she could feel the soft thrum of the tomb world's generators sending power coursing through the obsidian halls. The repetitive alarm calls of the tomb's Canoptech defenders filtered into her android brain, warning her of an incursion. Status report. Tomb breached. Automated defenses initiated. The tomb had not awoken according to schedule. Someone had intruded upon her realm. They would regret their folly. She strode across the chamber, pausing before a low table crafted from jet-black stone. Atop the structure, resting inside a glowing energy field, was her void scythe. She reached through the force field, which flickered and died at her touch, and grasped the hilt of the vast weapon. Its weight brought a certain comfort. She turned the weapon over in her hand and focused on the task before her, to drive back the vermin who dared to despoil her home. The tomb's Canoptech protectors had already engaged the foe. Casualty reports began to filter across the tomb's communications network, feeding the command consoles that lined the Overlord's crypt with images of the intruders. They were beings of flesh and blood, armed with little more than crude energy weapons. She watched as Canoptech wraiths phased through the walls of a corridor and descended upon a group of unwary trespassers, scything them apart with bladed limbs. The vermin had come in number, however. Elsewhere, red-robed beings, their bodies augmented with crude technology, did battle with Canoptech spiders and menacing swarms of Canoptech scarabs. The thought of these primitive creatures crawling through the walls of her bastion filled Agaseth with a cold fury. It was time to show the verminous intruders the utter folly of their assault. Staff in hand, she turned towards the chamber's exit, activating her command protocols as she stalked into the gloom. The chamber beyond was vast indeed, lined on all sides by black coffins, within which lay the skeletal forms of her phalanxes. Standing in the centre of the chamber were her Lich-Guard, silver necrodermy glistening in the light of their glowing hyper-phase swords and dispersion shields. As she joined her bodyguard, the eyes of the silent Necron warriors began to flicker to life. The green pinpricks of light shifted in the darkness as they started to stir in their open tombs. Slowly, the reactivated Necrons rose from their slumber. Their movements were more ponderous and far clumsier than that of their overlord. Some failed to stir at all, their coffins damaged by fallen masonry or their circuitry corroded during their long hibernation. Others sported tarnished armour and trailing cables. They were no longer the exquisite creations they had once been. Still, they were functional, and that was all that mattered. There will be time to restore my legions to their former glory, Agaseth thought to herself as the legion assembled. First, we must destroy these intruders. The warriors gathered in ranks, their Gauss weapons pulsing with green energy, eyes focused straight ahead. All were perfectly ordered. There would be no dissent in the ranks. These warriors lacked the capacity for fear. With her warriors in formation, Agaseth raised a hand, simultaneously tapping into the tomb complex's translocation matrix and transmitting the command protocols to activate the mustering chamber's teleportation devices. It was time to engage the foe. One by one, the silent ranks of Necron warriors were enveloped in glowing translocation beams. Agaseth watched as bodies rippled and faded from sight, cast into battle with those who dared trespass upon Necron territory. Eventually, the matter transporter's beam fell upon the Overlord and her Lich Guard. She felt the familiar anticipation of battle coursing through her body. I rise once more, she thought to herself as the beam engulfed her. First to cleanse this world, then to conquer the stars. The galaxy shall tremble before the might of the Soltec dynasty. And so there you have it, the fourth of the short stories. And interestingly enough, the first of these short stories that doesn't feature mass violence and combat, which is quite nice. Because I think that's something that gets a little lost in these intro ones where every story seemingly has to be violent and bloody and about the brutal carnage of weapons obliterating soldiers and blood spraying everywhere. The reality is that's not needed at all in a good story. My goodness, if you've ever read the Cyphers Kane novels, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He spends the majority of those books either talking about how much of a coward he is or running away from combat. So it's a good indicator that not all stories need to be about war and violence. However, those do make for the best stories. I will say it is quite refreshing reading things from the Necron perspective. Although it is a little early on, you'd think that they might do Space Marine perspective, a little bit about Space Marines fighting other things, so Chaos, maybe an Imperial Guard or Sisters of Battle perspective, a Mechanicus perspective, and then start to filter in all the other kind of foes that the enemies of mankind fight. If only for the pure sake of the majority of people that get into this hobby, their first faction is the Imperium of Man in one shape or form, whether it's Space Marines 90% of the time, or one of the other kind of like little side bits like the Imperial Guard or Sisters of Battle or Inquisition or you name it. But then again, Warhammer is not just the Imperium of Man, it's all the fascinating races that make up the universe. So, yeah, overall, pretty good. I will say as well, and this is again kind of highlighting the reason why I'm doing this, regardless of what people might sort of look at it and think. The reality is a lot of effort goes into these magazines, and if you do actually manage to complete one, you get to enjoy that. But chances are no one else is going to see it, no one else is going to experience it, because how many of you can honestly hold your hand up and said, oh yeah, I collected the Warhammer Imperium magazine from start all the way through to end? Like, no, of course you didn't. Of course you didn't. The majority of people didn't. And I don't hold that against anyone. Of course not. This is just the nature of these collectible magazines. People get tired, people burn out, people will, they'll pick up an issue for the models, they'll collect initially, life gets in the way, you have to cancel your subscription, you name it. But that doesn't stop these stories from being good. That doesn't stop them from having value. That doesn't stop them from being entertaining. And I think that's something that ultimately is driving this, because these are stories that, unless I'm mistaken, are not printed anywhere else. They might be, but all I know is for certain is that I've got them printed here in front of me right now, so I can do this right now. So why not? Why not take advantage of that? Why not read these out so that you guys do hear them? And then if they do get replaced, if it turns out I'm just rereading stuff that was found in codexes and army books, then so be it. But at the same time, all I can say with certainty is that they are here and I'm looking at them and I can read them to you. So I will. And there's 31 in total, and that was number 4. So another 27 to go, boys. All right, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode. All right, bye for now.